people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, and now it's time for another installment of what has fast become one of the most popular segments here on the channel, Ring IQ Hate Mail! The guy who goes by the name Ramiro Diaz said, didn't Zuffa say that they were not going to recognize belts other than their own?
What's this about?
The IBF stripping Jai Opataya of his IBF title, to which I responded, everybody keeps repeating that, but if they paid the sanctioning fee, all that flies out of the window. They're allowed to change their mind.
Zuffa is.
Everybody keeps saying the same thing. Oh, Dana White said, where changing your mind is not a crime. It's like DAZN and what was their initial sales pitch. Initially, they said that pay-per-view was dead. Fast forward a few years, now they're doing more pay-per-views than everybody. And before them, the PBC's initial sales pitch was free boxing for all.
And then they ended up doing more pay-per-views than everybody.
The point being, Zuffa hasn't been around all that long, just a matter of months, so that if they've doubled back on their initial stance about the sanctioning bodies, there's nothing wrong with that.
It's not a crime.
Though according to Ramiro Diaz, no, let's not be naive. They have not changed their minds. They need the belts in order to discredit them later.
What?
It's like a Trump voter getting to say they made a mistake, or Trump to later say, we are not criminals.
What?
Who's not a criminal? Border jumpers? I hate to break the news to you, buddy, but every sovereign nation has borders, and if you enter the country illegally, that makes you a criminal.
Write the rules, that's just what they are.
I don't know why you're choosing to make this boxing discussion political, but if you're gonna do that, the United States isn't doing anything to Mexico that Mexico isn't doing to Guatemala. Or do you expect me to believe that the Mexican government allows Guatemalans to just pour into their country in droves?
With no vetting process and no regard for their own borders, and frankly, even if they did, that's their own business. In the United States, if you come to the country illegally, you broke the law, and that makes it a crime.
It's not complicated. You'd do wise to stop filling your head with all of that leftist, liberal, Looney Tunes propaganda. It's got men thinking they can pee in the women's bathroom and seems to have you thinking that countries shouldn't have borders.
Back to Zuffa.
If Zuffa all of a sudden decided to soften their stance on the sanctioning bodies and decided to start working with them when it comes to select fighters, specific fighters, they're in their rights to do that, so long as they observe all of the IBF's protocols, which they did by paying the sanctioning fee ahead of time, by prominently displaying their belt at the ceremonial weigh-in. No rules were broken, weight was made,
Per diem was paid, so was the sanctioning fee, so what's the problem?
If the IBF have some sort of a beef with Zuffa Boxing that literally just launched earlier this year, that really shouldn't carry over to Jai Opataya, who was already their champion before Zuffa even formed. And if you're wondering why he went over there, it's because nobody else offered him anything. That's the part you don't want to address.
Matchroom didn't offer him an extension, Queensberry didn't offer him a contract, none of the major promotional outfits did. So what was he supposed to do?
You don't care, and that's why you just gloss over it like it doesn't matter that the only offer on the table for that guy at that time was from Zuffa. So what would you have had him do? Turn it down? That would be the equivalent of me telling you to go quit your job and just play scratch-offs, hoping that you hit the lottery.
Yeah, turn down the sure thing to try your chances in the wilderness. Try your luck.
Take your chances. You wouldn't do that any more than you would advise Jai Opataya to do that. So why are you castigating him for going over there? It's because you either don't understand the situation or don't care.
But the IBF was clearly in the wrong for castigating what was already their champion before Zuffa formed for signing to a promotional outfit. It's not the IBF's place to try to dictate to a fighter what promotion they can go to, who they can fight for.
All that accents is collusion, which you don't seem to understand. What that means is the IBF looks to be working with Zuffa's competitors to discourage fighters from signing to them.
The IBF's not supposed to have that kind of relationship with any promoter.
No sanctioning body is supposed to, but you guys are so used to boxing being bent.
Being crooked, you've grown accustomed to this, and you think the other guys are the bad guys. The bad guys have been right in front of you.
It's not a sanctioning body's job to try to dictate to a fighter where they can go discourage a fighter from signing a lucrative deal that would allow them to feed themselves and their families. That's not their place. You're overstepping your bounds. You're just here to sanction boxing matches.
And not intimidate fighters to not sign to Zuffa.
On behalf of the promoters that pay you, because that's what the relationship is. And if Zuffa handed you over your sanctioning fee to sanction that fight, it was your job to sanction it and shut the fuck up.
Sanctioning bodies are intended to be an impartial mediator between different fighters that are with different teams to give a division and give boxing a hierarchy. What they're not intended to do is work for the promoters.
But the moment you start intimidating fighters to not sign to a particular promoter, well, that's what you're doing. And that is unethical, that is wrong, that is not the IBF's job, and Jayo Pataya shouldn't be caught in the crossfire of the IBF's beef with Zuffa. If you don't understand that, then you don't understand collusion.
But then why would he? He doesn't seem to understand border policy and that all countries have their borders.
And that entering this one illegally is a crime.
Men's light heavyweight news. David Morell promises to bounce back after a knockout loss. The one-time rising star was on the wrong end of a massive upset on the Fabio Wortley versus Daniel Dubois card last weekend in England, getting stopped by Zach Chelli in the 10th and final round of what had been a competitive light heavyweight bout. It was the 28-year-old Cuban's second setback in 3 fights after losing a decision to David Benavidez in February of last year. Could Morell be finished as a legitimate title contender? Not so fast, he says.
Well, he never should have been one. I mean, they got this guy a WBA regular title when he had just a handful of fights. At super middle, at light heavy, he had done next to nothing. Yet here comes another WBA regular title.
This does not mean that David Morell's career is over. Morell wrote on his Instagram account, "We need to take this as a lesson from everything and move on with more strength. We'll be back soon and with more news for you." Morell is fortunate that he isn't 0-3 in his last fights, having been dropped by the unbeaten Imam Katayev only to win a split decision last July in New York between the Benavidez and Chelli fights.
And now, the last image fans have of him is when his body went limp against the ropes in the final minute of the fight against Chelli. Morell wants his fans to know that he's feeling well after the brutal stoppage and already plotting his return, although there is no indication of when he might step back into the ring. For those who were worried, "I'm fine and healthy, thank God," Morell said. "A man is not measured by the times he falls, but the times he gets up. This is the beginning of a new stage, not the end of the race."
It's not the best optics for his newly formed partnership with Ishmael Salas either. Up until recently, he was trained by Ronnie Shields, only so that ahead of the Chelli fight, he leaves Ronnie Shields for Ishmael Salas, then suffers another loss. And I myself am not attributing that loss to Salas, who I have a high opinion of. I'm just saying it's not a good look. Those are not good optics.
What is it going to take to rehabilitate David Morell and get him back in the winner's bracket and back on a hot streak again? I'm really not sure, because he may have moved up to the light heavyweight division too soon in pursuit of bigger purses, bigger paydays, far too early in his career. Perhaps what he needed to do was just stay at 168, continue to make his bones as a fighter. He followed David Benavidez up there, and he's been looking bang average ever since.
Maybe what he needed to do was just stay at 168, and at this point, I don't know if he can get back down there. If he can, maybe he should.
Not only that, but it may take for him to go back to fighting on PBC shows, PBC cards, because you can also pinpoint the moment he starts looking human to when he stops boxing on PBC shows. The Radavalle-Kalajdzic fight was not on a PBC card, and that took place before the Benavidez fight.
People were saying that he looked average in that.
3 out of David Morell's last 4 fights were not on PBC shows, and in all 3 of those fights he looked average.
Ordinary.
So maybe what it'll take to at least make him look like a world beater again is to go back to fighting stiffs on PBC shows. The problem there is, they don't really do that many.
Benavidez resume take a hit? Do it take a hit because
Wow,
of this guy?
David the one finished that dude. David the one caused that. Remember, that was only 2 fights ago, and since then, it's only been downhill.
You're right, man. David out here ruining niggas, yo. Yo, what the fuck was he doing? Playing show. I think he was up on the cards until he got stopped. If I'm not mistaken,
I think it's a lack of stamina, man. Because when you start doing that showboating shit, I don't know, man. I ain't even trying to make sense of it, man. I've never been on that hype train.
But you are on the David Benavidez hype train, which is why you're attributing Zach Chelly's stoppage over David Morell to David Benavidez, who didn't stop David Morell. He didn't even drop David Morell, and frankly, it's disingenuous to say that David Benavidez is the reason he's looking average when he looked average before that.
Well, that's what content creation is these days. Ulterior motives, agendas.
The people who put David Benavidez on a pedestal have to now maintain an image for him, because if neither he or his opponents are up to scratch, it'll make them look bad.
If you've been bragging about this guy's resume and David Morell is one of the names on there, then his resume can't be aging well.
It's basic arithmetic, basic math. The same math that we apply to any and every other fighter doesn't seem to apply to David.
The truth is, the both of those guys are media creations, perhaps one more than the other. David Morell didn't fight any elite level fighters at 168, but already they were calling him a boogeyman while he was on the PBC side of things, pouncing on no-hopers and nobodies.
And as soon as he moves up in weight and the fighters start to get a little bit more familiar, that's as soon as it took him to start looking human, and that's all it is. Could he have been a better fighter? Perhaps, if they wouldn't have moved him so fast, but the PBC cannot pride themselves on their vetting process, since all they care about is making you look good, as opposed to making you be good.
Now, what would it take to rehabilitate David Morell following his second professional loss? Maybe for him to move back down to 168, maybe for him to go back to fighting exclusively on PBC shows?
Clearly isn't cut out to campaign as a light heavyweight. His punch doesn't carry the same brunt that it used to, and his ability to take a punch seems to be diminishing.
Now, as it pertains to former champion Callum Smith, who was originally supposed to be fighting David Morell, who ended up losing to Zach Chelly, the ring has learned that Smith, the WBO interim light heavyweight champion, is next in line to face Dimitri Bivol, who is also the Ring Magazine, IBF, and WBA light heavyweight champion, should he beat Michael Eiffert at the end of this month.
According to WBC light heavyweight champion David Benavidez, however, there have been preliminary talks to stage an undisputed bout with Bivol at the end of the year, or Bivol could opt for a third fight versus Artur Beterbiev. Both options would be more lucrative than Smith. Though, of course, for David Benavidez to really come into the frame, that would require him to return to the light heavyweight division, which I don't think he's going to do. If Eiffert, the IBF mandatory, were to pull off a major upset, Smith would then be ordered to face him instead. Although Smith beat Joshua Buatsi for the secondary title last year, he needed to beat David Morell to get Bivol. Chelly took care of that for him last weekend by upsetting Morell via knockout.
Then shouldn't Callum Smith have to fight Zach Chelly?
Smith and Morell had been scheduled to fight April 18th in Liverpool, with the winner getting a mandated crack at Bivol. However, Smith, a former super middleweight champion, was forced to withdraw because of an unspecified injury during training camp. Instead of waiting, Morell opted to stay busy and face Chelly in Manchester. Morell dominated, but in the 9th, he was rocked, and in the 10th and final frame, Chelly stopped the Cuban in the waning seconds. As a result, Morell, who was ranked at number 1 via the WBO, lost his position in the sanctioning body. Bivol beat Callum Smith on points as an amateur.
So that's gotta be good news for Callum Smith, that he's still in the running for a Dimitri Bivol fight. fight, but it's less than ideal that he's been out of action for over a year, and in an ideal world, he would keep busy with Zach Chelli in the summer to challenge Dimitri in the fall.
And he can beat Zach Chelli, I don't have a doubt in my mind. If you make that fight for, say, late July or August, sometime in there,
He can beat him.
but what is the WBO going to have to say about that? If the interim champion takes on a voluntary fight in the interim, would that rescind his status? Seems like something that's going to require some smoothing over, because they're saying that the winner of Bivol versus Eiffert has to fight him next. But who's to say that he has to fight them next? Maybe he takes a fight in the interim, shakes off the cobwebs,
He needs to.
and it feels like, while all of this is going on, this is what David is going to tell people. This is why he doesn't come back to the light heavyweight division.
He's gonna say, well, Bivol's fighting Callum or Artur or this guy or that guy, when it was never really his intention to move back down, because male boxers are not like female boxers. They don't often yo-yo in weight, and the jump from light heavy up to cruiser is one of the bigger ones, to where if a guy goes up there, he's not likely to come back down.
The boxing world collectively seems to have lost its common sense. The moment they saw David Benavidez go up to cruiser, they should have known his days as a light heavyweight are over, and when he follows it up by requesting a catch weight for Dimitri, a catch weight of 190,
This guy's not coming back down, and he never intended to.
but as the situation at light heavyweight plays out between Dimitri, his mandatories, and the former champion Artur Beterbiev, that's what David Benavidez is going to use as the excuse to not come back down.
They are not gonna fight. It's not gonna happen. I've been telling you this.
What it may become entering the fall and winter months is a smear campaign against Dimitri Bivol for not being available to fight David Benavidez, when the solution really was staying put, staying there, and fighting,
Not moving up.
not fighting Zerto, but fighting Callum Smith when Turki El Al Sheikh first offered him to you.
So many things happen in boxing so fast that people tend to forget details like that one. That Turkey offered David Benavidez a Callum Smith fight when David traveled to Saudi for the Beterbiev versus Bivol fight. And David,
who had just arrived that day, left that same day.
Hopefully, we might be looking at a future opponent. Callum Smith, we're both at 175. He just gave a great fight, and I think me and Callum Smith would be a great fight, so maybe we can make that happen in the future.
We received a large amount of millions to fight Smith, and we denied.
Did you catch that? Samson admitted they were made a multi-million-dollar offer to fight Callum Smith, which they rejected. Let's hear it again.
DJ, play it back.
A large amount of millions to fight Smith, and we denied.
The point being, instead of going up to cruiserweight and fighting Zerto, just to pretend you're going to drop back down, if you would have stayed at light heavyweight, you could have fought Callum Smith for a boatload of cash and stayed in position to fight Dimitri Bivol.
You made things much more difficult by leaving the weight class, because now you can't come back down. You know you can't come back down.
In fighting Callum Smith, you would have got him out the way, so he wouldn't have remained Dimitri Bivol's mandatory, and the way would have been clear for you and Dimitri to fight. But what have I maintained? It was never really David's intention to fight Dimitri, because everything he's done was counterproductive towards that fight. Most of the American media doesn't want to call him out on it, but I will.
Because I can read between the lines, and I know it was never your intention to fight him, and once you moved up, it was never your intention to move back down.
So now they're going to use all this stuff that's going on as the reason they're not going to, and the fight won't happen.
You'll see.